The Tampa Bay Lightning Prospect Tournament is in the books, which means our attention now turns to the big boys. The Tampa Bay Lightning camp and preseason. We'll break it down on today's Locked on Lightning podcast.
You're Locked on Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked on Lightning your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Tampa Bay Lightning podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to begin by shouting out our everydayers, those of you who tune into every single show, every single day. We love you guys. We appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan, and I am joined by the CJ Stroud to my incomplete passes jamming on the turf, Greg Stephen. Greg, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. That was one of your better ones, in my opinion. Having a great week, I guess, so far. Watched the prospects yesterday, and then we've got preseason coming up. So hockey is coming back. We're getting into the swing of things. So, yeah, going to have a lot to talk about going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And hockey is right around the corner. First preseason game on Monday. Tampa Bay Lightning should be reporting to camp this week. So yeah, it's in full swing, bud. Like we are getting closer to puck drop, and that is an amazing feeling. Let's start off by talking about the Prospects Tournament. Of course, we had a great breakdown of it yesterday. For the first couple of days. But yesterday was the grand finale, and the Lightning finished it in pretty successful fashion, 5-1 over the Carolina Hurricanes. And Greg, we had a segment on yesterday's show where we were talking about like things that we wanted to see in the last, I guess like day of camp or in the last game. And I would kind of safely say that the Lightning sort of ticked all those boxes.
Yeah, I'm with you. And nothing like ending on a win, right? We did talk about how, wins and losses don't matter too much, but I think winning the end of this is a good morale booster. We saw more of, everyone really. And I think you had brought up Mercury yesterday, and he was phenomenal. So just, I think everything went as we hoped.
Yeah, he got a fight, set up a couple of goals. Really good in the face-off circle, so proud to call that. We also talked about wanting to see some more from the AHL guys. Tristan Allard was one of the people we named by name, and he was, I would say pretty solid yesterday as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then we wanted to see more from kind of the big guns. We had Ethan Gauthier come up with a couple of big plays. I thought Sam O'Reilly really stood out in this one. It was probably the most he's looked like a top prospect. I think he's really showcased some of his two-way game. Yeah, I mean, if you're a Lightning fan, you sort of left this game more excited about the state of your future than I think you probably did at any point during the first two games.
Definitely. And it's good that we're not saying the same names every day too when we're talking about this, because that just shows how much depth there actually is there, right? And I think, the Lightning's pool is not highly rated necessarily online. But I think after watching this, it should be boosted a little bit, in my opinion. And I do want to talk about Mercury one more time. I had to pull this up because I wanted to make sure I got it right. But I really like a quote that he said as well, and I just want to put it out there. He said, "I'd say I'm a 200-foot center that can win faceoffs, a power forward, somebody who likes to play the game below the hash marks, get around the net, not afraid to throw their weight around." And I just really love that. I think that's exactly the kind of guy they need on this team. And those guys are the ones that really drive the superstars too, right? Like Kucherov needs a guy that can get those pucks, that can get in those dirty areas to make the plays that he makes. So that kind of player is so sought after. And I like that he labels himself as that guy instead of saying, "Oh, I love scoring goals," right? Or, I love passing the puck. He's more of like that grindy kind of game. And it's really encouraging to see. And he was a guy that wasn't even really on my radar at all. Until this tournament, right? So it just shows you how great this actually is for fans, for these guys that are playing in it, and for the Lightning and the franchises in general too.
Yeah, I feel like in these tournaments, you're kind of looking for, like, you know who your blue chip prospects are, right? You're kind of looking for the guys that it's like, okay, who's going to make an impact in Syracuse? And who's somebody that maybe with a few years of seasoning, we can turn into a really good role player in the
Yep.
NHL. And McCurry checks both those boxes with me. I think he's certainly going to be a big player in Syracuse this year, probably somewhere in that bottom six, but I think there's a lot of room for growth there.
Yeah.
And he was really, really solid on faceoffs this whole tournament. And that's something that is a big weak point for the NHL Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's a guy that I have an eye on. 2-3 years, maybe he, maybe earns a shot. But I like what I saw from him. And I like what I saw from really everybody in this team this weekend. Another good goaltending performance. So, yeah, I mean, I go back to what I say yesterday, Greg. Again, we talked about wins and losses. Doesn't really matter in a tournament
Right.
like this. You kind of want to see the compete level, which I really thought you saw in the first two games. The team being able to survive a lot of onslaught from the other teams and being able to survive that and, keeping it close, getting a win over Florida. And then I thought we saw them put their foot on the gas a little bit more against Carolina. And Carolina's not a bad prospect pool
Right.
either. I mean, not as deep as they were, like, let's say, like 3 years ago. But I would say, like, this was a very impressive prospects win over a team with a pretty deep pool of prospects. And you have to feel good about that if you're a Lightning fan.
Absolutely. I'm so with you. And again, just ending on a high note is great for morale. And I'm sure some of the guys on the actual Lightning team have watched this and it's encouraging for them too, right? So
Yeah.
I think all it does is do good things for everyone involved, right? Even fans. And like you had mentioned this in the last show, it's so great that they put these online for free. Like
Yeah.
to be able to watch them and just like spread the game is good. So yeah, all positives from me. And this was actually my first time really paying attention to this, to be honest with you. And I'm glad I did because it's a learning experience for me too. And I'll continue to do it moving forward now that I know more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We should hear something about the NHL training camp. Probably either today or tomorrow. I know, like, last year they announced it on September 16th what the roster and schedule was going to be. It's going to be fun because I think we're going to have a lot of these guys like Tristan Allard, like Sam O'Reilly are going to come over. Ethan Gauthier, another one, are going to come over and then try to compete now in the big league training camp. So yeah, it's Any final thoughts on anything from the Prospects Tournament?
No, again, big grade of A for me, and got some new names on my radar, guys I didn't know about, and yeah, I'm happy for the Lightning. I'm encouraged for the future. I feel like I've kind of been doom and gloom about what the future might be in 5 years, and this has really encouraged me to kind of change that outlook and feel a little more positive. I brought it up a little bit briefly yesterday, but it does feel like the Lightning are semi retooling on the fly, and I really like that. So all positive here.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of youth coming up here in the next couple of years, I think. But I'm with you. Impressed. I would say A+ performance all around for this Prospects Tournament, which is good considering the prospect pool coming in was not highly regarded. It's fun. I think we got some good players to watch for moving forward. As we mentioned, our thought now turns towards training camp and the preseason. A couple of thoughts on what you want to see this training camp, maybe another move, and just thoughts on the preseason format as a whole. What do you hope to get out of it? We'll talk about that coming up in just 1 minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits exactly the way I want to bet. I can get player props. I can build a same game parlay. I can even jump into the action live as it unfolds with some live bets. It makes every game more exciting, whether I'm watching my team or just keeping an eye on my fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little zest to my Sunday football watching experience. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by using FanDuel.com to get started. Again, FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to Locked On Lightning. Nick Morgan alongside Greg Stephen here with you. And Greg, our thoughts now turn to training camp and the preseason. Lightning coming in with a lot of expectations, should be one of the top teams in the NHL again. Also, a lot of question marks. A lot of people are wondering if they're as good as they were a couple of years ago when they were, the back-to-back cup winners. What are you looking for this training camp as training camp gets ready to get underway?
Yeah, great question. I'm looking for Gage to take that next step up. And I think that starts in training camp. I think that's reassuring him that he is implemented in the Lightning roster. I want to say he's cemented there, really. And I'm hoping that they have strategized around using his skill sets. That's something that I'm really looking forward to. And I don't know how much that can really happen in camp and preseason, but I do think it starts there. I think Kucherov is one of the guys I look to when I think about someone who's passionate and wants to be the best at what they do. That guy hits the ice as soon as the season is over, and he is back out there because he wants to be better. He wants to get better, and all he wants to do is perfect his craft. I think hard work is done in practice, and then you're just executing the hard work in a game, right? So I think it starts here. I want to see Gage really get involved more. I hope his confidence is much higher this season, and I think last season probably boosted it. Like, I think that stress of like, am I going to stay on this roster is gone, hopefully, because I think that opens up the ability for him to be a little more creative with his game. So I do want to see, that's like my biggest one for me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think for me, it's just getting guys, get the chemistry going.
Yep.
We saw how good the line of Jake Gensel, Nikita Kucherov, and Braden Point wound up being at the end of last year. You think about where they were this time last year, that line was just trying to figure out how to play together.
Exactly.
It was the first time that, Jake Gensel had come in. You figure out that dynamic. This year, I think I would say maybe less holes on the roster this year. Everybody kind of knows like where they're going to slot in, maybe with the exception of, some of the bottom six. Is Bjorkstrand going to play up a little bit? Are guys like Jacob Pelletier going to fight for, a higher role? Pontus Holmberg coming in is going to play a big role. But, the top six, and I would say your top four defensive pairs are pretty set. There's not going to be a lot of battles for position there. So at this point, it's just getting that chemistry. And now that you're set, you can kind of fine tune some things, really work on that communication, really know like how you're going to move without the puck when it's here, when it's there. You can kind of go over different situations with your line mates. And I think that's going to be a big boost for the Lightning because you're not exactly worried about where guys are going to play. You can build that chemistry. And I think that's a big thing, a big advantage for the Lightning going into training camp this year that, quite frankly, they haven't really had in any of the past 3 camps just because there's been so much turnover.
Absolutely. And I love what you said because I think it actually ties into exactly what I was saying about Gage. I think now that he knows he's there, it allows him to develop that chemistry. He kind of knows what his role is, like you said. So it does allow him to settle in, practice a little more with a focused mindset on what he actually is going to be paired with, or who rather. And I like the fact that that bottom line isn't necessarily solidified. I think having it be a little more fluid is actually very important. And I don't want to say that guys don't try all the time because everyone that plays hockey at this level is trying to be on this team, right? I'm not taking that away from anyone. But I think having it be uncertain gives them a little extra push, right? Because you're fighting for that spot. And while it's your teammate, you want to play better than your teammate so you can be on that line. And I think that's good because all those guys are going to give 100% every shift because they want to be on that line. And I think that's good. And while they're not competing for that first line, I don't think anyone on this team thinks, oh, I'm going to outrank Jake Gensel with Cooch. That's not going to happen. But still, to fight for that fourth line spot is very important on a contending team like this. I mean, this is a stacked team, in my opinion, still to this day. You got guys like Cooch, Point, Gensel, Hedman, and now we have Hagel and Sorrell. Like, it's just throughout a stacked lineup. Anyone would want to play on this team, right? So that competition for that last line spot is awesome. I think it really lights a fire under guys, just that like extra little kick. And yeah, as far as that beginning in camp, I mean, that's your first time to shine, right? Like, you want to show what you're bringing this year, and this is the time. You start now. It's every day from now moving forward.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned some guys in this last segment about prospects. Sam O'Reilly. I don't think he'll make the team, but it's also not out of the question that he comes in and maybe fights for that spot, because I think his two-way game is there right now. I don't think it's far-fetched to think, somebody like Ethan Gauthier can come in and maybe be like a high-end competitor to maybe earn a spot. I think it's very possible that competition is going to fuel both sides, because it's going to fuel the AHL guys. They're going to be motivated. They're going to try to come up and earn a spot. You also have guys like Zemgus Girgensons who are going to have to play very, very well in training camp and in these preseason games. And I think it's going to benefit him, instead of being just sort of, the plug-in guy bottom line last year, now he's got to actively take a step forward in his game and play a big role to kind of justify a spot. So I'm with you. I think that competition is big for that bottom line, especially. And you know what? Those are your competitive guys anyway. Like, those are the guys that go out there and hit. Those are the guys that go out there and drop the gloves.
Right.
They forecheck. You want to see that juice. You want to see that energy out there in camp, and you kind of want them to have that competitive, I have to earn it mindset. So, the fourth line, I'm going to throw in like the bottom defensive pair there, because I do think there's space for somebody like Max Crozier to earn, maybe an everyday spot. That's, I think, the battle I'm watching the most going into camp and going into some of these preseason games.
Yep, I'm with you. And actually, I'm glad you said Max Crozier too, because he's a guy that I think should slot into these D pairings at some point, because I think his game is awesome. I've watched a lot of his games, and I think he's better than some of these guys sometimes. And I don't see why he wouldn't take a spot on this team. I think, with the departure of Perbix and just like some of the questionable qualities of like the youngness of like Lilleberg and the decision making there, depending on how he plays, Crozier can come right up. I don't see why he wouldn't. So I'd like to see him come up too. And I think, like you said, it creates the same type of vibe, a little competition for some of these spots. And that's a good thing to have on teams. I think I don't think it's like creates any animosity between these guys either. They all know what this is, right? So
yeah,
it's good. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. It's a business. Yeah. And I think they're just as excited to compete than anything.
Yep.
Thoughts on the preseason as a whole? This is probably the last year we'll have this many preseason games. If you're the Lightning, how do you do this? Yeah. Any, that kind of talk. Plus, any other moves you want to see before the Lightning start camp? We'll dive into that in just 1 second. I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. So how do you find amazing candidates right now? Easy. You just need to use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Lightning. Terms and conditions apply. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Welcome back to Locked On Lightning. Nick Morgan alongside Greg, Steven, and Greg. We have preseason hockey coming up in 6 days. That is when the Lightning's first game is. Preseason. A lot of people hate it. In fact, it seems like the NHL might hate it because it sounds like we're getting fewer preseason games starting next year when the schedule goes to 84 games. So that's something to keep in mind. What are your general thoughts about just the concept of preseason? Is this something that you're like, we don't need this? Is this something you like in a certain extent? What are your thoughts?
I'm not really a fan, to be honest with you. I think when games are meaningless, it's not like a huge watch for fans necessarily. Because you root for your team to win, and in this, if they win, it doesn't count for anything. So, look, I don't love it as a fan. As an athlete, I understand why they do it. You want to warm up the body to playing competitive hockey, right? And this is an opportunity to, if you're a superstar, just play a few minutes, get out there, and get reacclimated to game speed after taking 3 months off, right? So, I think there's some element of that there. But contrary to that, I don't think any of these guys are giving 100% in these games. And maybe some of them do initially on a shift or two just to get the, really power through. Like, I don't think Cooch is going to skate 25 minutes, right? Like, he's not going to. It's just not realistic.
He's not going to do it in an all-star game. He's not going to do it in a preseason game.
Right. So it's just like, it's really, to me, more like, I don't want to call it like AHL Prospect Tournament, but it's similar, right? It's like a similar vibe to me. I will say I dislike it less than I dislike the NFL's because I just think in the NFL, there's just so many more injuries. So, in football with the injury like that, it's just much more detrimental to a team. In hockey, I just feel like we see far fewer injuries. So I don't dislike it in that regard, right? I don't think it's as jeopardizing to a player's health and career. But there is still an element of that there, right? You still got to, if you want to play in these games, like there is always a risk of getting hurt, right? So little added to that. Other than that, I don't know. If you're playing an 84 game season, I don't see why you can't just jump in. The games are, while games can be meaningful near the end, like we've seen how close some of these standings get, right? Like they all count, right? I don't want to take away from the games, but it's not like the NFL, like 16, 17 games, each game is everything, right? In the NHL, if you start a little slowly, that doesn't mean your season's over. So I don't know. I can go either way. I think as a fan, I'd like to see less of it. But what about you? You look like you have a different take.
Here's the thing. Everybody hates preseason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use, nobody cares about preseason, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to throw an example at you from your favorite NFL team, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay. My favorite.
Yeah. Great Joe Burrow MVP pick, by the way. That's looking rough. Everybody hates the preseason. It's like these games are stupid. The players are out there for, one drive at a time. What's the point of this? Let's just get to regular season. Everybody hates it until those first 2 games of the regular season, Greg. When Joe Burrow's out there cold, Jamar Chase is out there cold, and they have zero chemistry. And your brand new offensive line has zero idea of how to protect the guy who's your starting quarterback.
Yep.
And, they're just a little bit off kilter. They're just a little bit, timing is off, and they wind up losing the first 2 games. Everybody hates preseason until that comes into play during the regular season. And look, I know that it's different for an 82 game season. You got more time to figure it out, but you still want to start the season on a high note. You still want to go out there with that chemistry. You don't want to be trying to figure out your line mates and figure out your timing while games that are going to count towards you making a playoff spot / what spot you have, possibly home ice advantage, while you're playing games that count towards that. So I think if you're the Lightning, there are certain parts of preseason where you have to embrace. And look, you're not going to see Nikita Kucherov play all 6 games. Actually, I think it might be 7 this year because we have that Orlando game against the Florida Panthers. You're not going to see him play like all 7 games. You're not also going to see him doing like 20 minutes a night or anything like that.
Right.
But you still want to put him out there in situations, right? In situations that he would face during the regular season. You want to see him, Jay Gensel, and Braden Point play a game together, maybe a few games together, 15 minutes or so a game. You want to see him out there on the first power play unit during the preseason because you're going to want him entering game 1, with his chemistry up to speed with everybody else. You're not, So, like, nobody up there is going to fight for a roster spot. Nobody up there probably cares if they win or lose, but you still want to go out there and get your chemistry up to speed. And I do think preseason's a way to do that. And look, I don't think they need 7 games of it. I think if you do, maybe 4 preseason games a year, 2 at home, 2 on the road, maybe a 5th if on a neutral site. I kind of like when teams like go to non-traditional markets and play. Like, I think the Blue Jackets played in Cleveland one year. It was something crazy like that. Mm-hmm. I like that. I don't think they need that many preseason games. So I think there's maybe some tweaks that you can do with it. But at the same time, I do think it's important. And I think part of being a good NHL head coach like John Cooper is knowing how to use your players in those preseason games to maximize what you're going to get out of them during a regular season. I think John Cooper's done a pretty good job of that. And I expect him to give some minimal but very important time to his stars during these games.
All valid points. I'll throw a couple counterpoints at you, though.
Sure.
Let's go back to your Joe Burrow example with the Bengals, right? And they had no, like, you're right. Like, it looks like they're cold, but why isn't the other team then? Right. Like, it's not like it's not fair. Like, every other team's also in the same pool. Right. So everyone's starting cold then, if that's the argument, in my opinion. Right.
Well, there's also a lot of teams that play their starters.
Right. Sure. And that was going to be my next point. Like, you were talking about how let's throw Kuch out on the first power play, see how he does in this preseason, get him warmed up in there. But it's like, if the other team's not even playing, at their realist, then is that really a representation of like what the power play will be? Because I doubt you're going to face, if let's say you preseason the Panthers, they're not going to put their real power penalty kill out there and then actually really lock Kuch down the way they're going to lock him down in the regular season. That's just how I look at it. So I think it's just a little less. It's just still not quite, I guess my point is it's really still not ever going to be quite game level, right? And it gets them a little bit up to speed. I just don't think it's still not like a real game, right?
Well, it's usually, I think that the way it's gone traditionally in the NHL is like home games, you play kind of your regular lineup. Away games is when like your fourth liners kind of carry the show and all your minor leaguers.
Yep.
But again, it's not about necessarily going best versus best right now. It's just finding the chemistry. Finding the chemistry. Like are your touches as crisp as they were last year? Are your passes to your teammates as good as they were last year? Are your teammates in the same spot that they say they're going to be when a puck is along the boards or when you're breaking into the zone?
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that I'm more worried about people getting up to speed on. I don't necessarily care that Nikita Kucherov is going to get a shift against the number 1 penalty kill.
Sure. That was obviously a niche example.
Yeah, but I do care that he's going to go out there and get his positioning ready. Kind of like it's kind of like if you haven't ridden a bike in like 10 years and you know how to do it, but you get on and like those first couple steps, like those first couple pedals are kind of wobbly and you're going back and forth. And then you start to pedal and you get in the zone and it's just like, oh yeah, just like old times.
That's me with skiing.
Yeah, exactly. Like your first ski trip every year. It's that. It's just kind of getting the feel of it. And I think that is more important than people around the league think.
You're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. As someone who played hockey at a competitive level, like for a while, you're right. Like you go out there and you're like, I don't even remember how to skate. Then
exactly.
You got to settle in.
Yeah, it takes, and you get the hang of it. You don't forget it. It's just like those first steps. It's like, ooh, it's been a while since I've done this.
Yeah, a little rusty.
I would rather have that in 6 preseason games than I would for the first 6 regular season games.
Right. Then watch like a sloppy mess of disaster the first few games. Yeah.
Yeah. And now after your first 2 weeks of the season, you're having to answer the what the hell's wrong with the Tampa Bay Lightning question.
Right.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting for sure. First preseason coming up next Monday. Obviously, we have a lot to talk before then. Hey, we should hear information about when camp officially starts coming up here in the next couple of days or so. We'll have a full camp breakdown. Look at the roster, maybe some surprises on the professional tryout and non-roster invitee, I guess, front is what you call it. But we'll have a breakdown on that coming up, plus a lot more to get to this week. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Lightning. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back with an all-new episode tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.